The silence in the hospital room was a heavy, living thing. It was broken only by the rhythmic, mechanical hiss of the ventilator and the distant, muffled cries of a world that felt a million miles away. For Muniba Mazari, trapped in the wreckage of her own body, the world had shrunk to this. For white walls, the sterile scent of antiseptic, and a pain so profound it had ceased to be a physical sensation, and had become the very air she breathed. She was 21, but she felt ancient. Her body, which had once danced with youthful grace, was now a map of fractures and failures. A broken arm, a shattered collarbone, a rib cage that felt like shattered glass with every shallow breath, and a spine that had been irrevocably severed, leaving the lower half of her body a silent, unresponsive territory. Paralyzed. The word echoed in the hollows of her mind. A life sentence delivered in a single, clinical term. Lying there, a prisoner in her own flesh, she would stare at the cracks in the ceiling, tracing them with her eyes until they blurred. Why me? The question was a silent scream that had become her constant companion. What is the point of this existence? To be a burden? A monument to misery? One day, a doctor, his face a mask of practiced sympathy, had come to her with a clipboard and a list of her losses. "You wanted to be an artist," he had said, his voice devoid of the gravity his words carried. "I'm afraid you won't be able to hold a paintbrush again. The damage to your wrist and arm is too severe." Muniba had turned her head away, tears welling in her eyes, refusing to let him see them fall. The next day, another verdict. The spine injury, you will not walk again. She had taken a ragged breath, the movement sending fresh shards of pain through her chest. "It's all right," she had whispered, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. But the final blow, the one that shattered the last vestiges of her spirit, came later. Because of the injury and the spinal fixation, a different doctor explained, his tone matter-of-fact, "You will not be able to bear children." That was the day the last light inside her seemed to flicker and die. In her culture, a woman's worth was so often tied to motherhood. Without it, she felt incomplete, a hollow vessel. She looked at her mother, who stood by her bedside with a strength Muniba could no longer fathom. "Why me, Ammy?" she finally sobbed, the dam of her composure breaking. "Why am I even alive?" Her mother, a woman whose own heart was breaking, gently wiped her daughter's tears. She didn't offer empty platitudes. Instead, she offered words that would become the first, fragile thread pulling Muniba back from the abyss. "Beta, this too shall pass. God has a greater plan for you. I don't know what it is, but he surely has." In that sterile white room, at the bottom of a well of despair she never knew existed, Muniba Mazari began the long, agonizing journey of discovering what that plan was. It was a journey that would not be about walking again, but about learning to fly on broken wings. It was a story that would not be defined by her fall, but by her magnificent, unyielding rise. This is that story. Long before the accident, before the wheelchair and the titanium that would become part of her skeleton, there was a girl with stars in her eyes and a palette of dreams. Muniba was born into a conservative Baloch family, where tradition was the bedrock of life. She was a vibrant, sensitive child, her imagination a wild, untamed thing. While other children played with toys, Muniba played with light and shadow, with the hues of the sunset and the shades of human emotion. Her dream was to be an artist, to capture the world's beauty on canvas and make people feel what she felt. But life, in its unpredictable way, had other, more conventional plans. At 18, caught between her own aspirations and the weight of familial expectation, she found herself at a crossroads. Her father wished for her to be married. In a family where good daughters did not say no to their parents, Muniba, wanting to make her father happy, swallowed her dreams and whispered, "If that makes you happy, I will say yes." The marriage was not a happy one. It was a union of two strangers, a cage that slowly stifled her spirit. The vibrant colors of her imagination began to fade into the monotonous gray of a life she had never wanted. For 2 years, she tried to paint happiness onto a cracked and crumbling canvas, pretending everything was fine, silencing the artist within who was screaming for release. The accident happened on a road in the outskirts of Balochistan, a mundane journey that turned catastrophic in a heartbeat. Her husband fell asleep at the wheel. The car veered off the road, tumbling into a ditch. In the chaos and screaming metal, he managed to free himself. Muniba stayed inside, the car a twisted tomb around her. The list of her injuries was a brutal catalog of destruction. Radius and ulna of her right arm fractured, wrist shattered, shoulder and collarbone broken, her entire rib cage fractured, lungs and liver lacerated. But the injury that would define the rest of her life was to her spine. 3 vertebrae were completely crushed. The transaction of the spinal cord was complete. In an instant, the connection between her brain and her legs was severed forever. There was no first aid, no ambulance, no hospital nearby. She was dragged from the wreckage, an act of rescue that likely completed the severance of her spinal cord. They placed her in the back of a 4-wheeler Jeep for a 3-hour, bone-jarring ride to the nearest medical facility. Every bump, every jolt was a fresh agony, a brutal reminder that half her body was broken, and the other half was dead. The 2.5 months in the hospital were a descent into a special kind of hell. Surgeries followed one after another. Metal rods and screws were inserted to piece her broken frame back together. She was dubbed the Iron Lady by some, a title that felt both fitting and bitterly ironic. The titanium held her body together, but it was her spirit that was on the verge of collapsing. She was a constellation of pain. The physical agony was a constant, screaming presence, but it was the emotional and psychological devastation that truly threatened to consume her. The doctor's pronouncements were not diagnoses. They were obituaries for the life she had known. The artist was told she could never paint. The woman was told she could never walk. The potential mother was told she could never give birth. She lay in her hospital bed, a prisoner of white sheets and beeping machines, and questioned her very existence. The tunnel was dark, and there was no light at the end of it. The only thing that kept her from completely surrendering was the sight of her mother and brothers. She saw the fear and pain in their eyes, and she knew she could not add to their burden. She had to be strong for them, even if it was the greatest performance of her life. It was her mother's words that became her anchor. This too shall pass. They were simple, ancient words, but in Muniba's despair, they were a lifeline. One day, tired of the oppressive whiteness of the walls and the scrubs, she made a request. "I know my hand is deformed," she told her brothers, "but I need color. Bring me a small canvas and some paints." The act of painting that first piece on her hospital bed was an act of rebellion. It was her soul fighting back. Her hand, clumsy and racked with pain, slowly, deliberately, pushed color across the blank surface. It was not a masterpiece of technique, but it was a masterpiece of survival. Without uttering a single word, she was screaming her grief, her anger, and her fragile hope onto that canvas. It was her therapy. It was her prayer. Finally, she was discharged, but her ordeal was far from over. She returned home only to be confined to a bed for 2 more years. Severe pressure ulcers and infections made it impossible for her to sit. She was a bird in a cage, her world reduced to a single room. Her view limited to a window framing a world that moved on without her. She would listen to the birds chirping, a sound of such simple, effortless freedom that it was like a physical ache. It was during this period of enforced stillness that she had an epiphany. She realized how lucky people were to have the simple, taken-for-granted ability to walk, to run, to simply go outside. They were blessed, and they didn't even know it. She made a promise to herself. "The day I sit, I will make people realize their own blessings. I will share this pain to show them the value of their own freedom." After 2 years and 2.5 months, the day finally came. The infections had healed, the ulcers had closed. It was time to try the wheelchair. The moment she was lifted into it was a moment of profound significance. It was not a moment of defeat, but of rebirth. She was leaving the bed, not to walk, but to move forward in a different way. They wheeled her in front of a mirror. For the first time, she saw herself not as a patient, but as a woman on a wheelchair. The reflection was stark, a permanent new reality. And in that moment, she had the most important conversation of her life, with herself. "I cannot wait for a miracle," she told her reflection, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I cannot sit in a corner, crying and begging for mercy. No one has time for that. I have to accept myself the way I am. The sooner the better." With a trembling hand, she applied a bold red lipstick. Then in a flash of self-doubt, she wiped it off. Asterisk, a person on a wheelchair shouldn't do this. What will people say? Asterisk, the thought was a reflex, a ghost of her old life. Then a new, stronger voice emerged from within. This time, she applied the lipstick again, her hand steady. This time it was for her. She was reclaiming herself. She was deciding to live for herself, not for the approval of others. She was going to be perfectly, unapologetically imperfect. That day, she decided to systematically dismantle her fears. She made a list. 1. The fear of divorce. Asterisk, she had clung to a failing marriage out of fear of being alone, of societal judgment. She realized this fear was a prison. By setting her husband free and liberating herself from the toxic relationship, she found an emotional strength she never knew she possessed. When she heard he was remarrying, she sent him a text wishing him well. It was not an act of weakness, but the ultimate act of strength and self-liberation. 2. The fear of infertility. Asterisk, the doctor's words had made her feel incomplete. But she reframed the narrative. There were countless children in the world longing for a mother's love. She decided to adopt. She put her name on lists, and she waited with a patient, hopeful heart. 2 years later, the call came. A baby boy. When she went to adopt him, she feared judgment from the official, who she assumed would see a woman in a wheelchair and deem her unfit. Instead, the man looked at her and said, "I know you will be the best mother for this child. You are both lucky to have each other." Her son Nail, named after the river Nile, became her greatest teacher. He taught her patience and how to see ability where others saw disability. When he wanted to play football and she lamented that she couldn't kick the ball, he simply said, "That's all right. Your legs are not working but your hands do. Let's play catch." He taught her that her glass was always half full. 3. The fear of people. Asterisk, she had hidden from visitors for 2 years, unable to bear their pitying looks and sympathetic whispers. She overcame this by forcing herself into the public eye. She began to paint professionally, becoming Pakistan's first wheelchair-bound artist. She did modeling campaigns, breaking stereotypes by appearing in fashion spreads, even once dressing as a clown to show that joy and humanity existed in all forms. She became a television anchor, using the national platform to speak her mind and share her story. Muniba never claimed she did it alone. She spoke of the we that is essential for any me to succeed. She drew inspiration from real-life heroes who embodied unimaginable courage. There was Walid Khan, a teacher who was shot 8 times by terrorists during an attack on a school. When Muniba visited him in the hospital, his face was deformed, his body broken, his future uncertain. She struggled to find words of comfort. But before she could speak, this young boy, with a toothless smile, asked her, "Are you Muniba Mazari? Baji, let's take a selfie." He later called his scars his medals, and vowed to become a doctor as his act of revenge against the terrorists. His resilience in the face of pure evil put her own struggles into perspective. There was her son Nail, whose innocent wisdom constantly reminded her to reframe her challenges, to find the game where others saw only limitation. And above all, there was her mother, the woman who never cried in front of her, who was her unwavering fortress. She was the one who whispered the words that became Muniba's mantra. There will be haters, there will be naysayers, there will be disbelievers, and then there will be you, proving them all wrong. Her mother was the hero who taught her that heroes have no gender. As her platform grew, so did her message. It crystallized into a powerful philosophy born from pain and polished by gratitude. She challenged the very concept of perfection. Society, she argued, had created impossible norms. We all are perfectly imperfect, she would say, and that is perfectly all right. She rejected the pressure to look or be a certain way, emphasizing that true perfection lies in a soul that is kind, empathetic, and generous. Her own imperfections became her greatest strength. They allowed her to connect with the marginalized and the brokenhearted. She began working for the transgender community in Pakistan, finding a deep kinship with them. When her friend, a transgender woman named Beachley, told her, "You are just like me," Muniba agreed. To a judgmental world, they were both imperfect. But in that shared space, they found acceptance and power. She became the National Goodwill Ambassador for UN Women Pakistan, advocating for gender equality, inclusion, and the rights of women and children. She was featured in BBC's 100 Women list and Forbes 30 Under 30. But she insisted that real happiness was not found in fame or success. It was found in gratitude. Real happiness lies in gratitude, she proclaimed. Be grateful for what you have, and you will end up having more. If you concentrate on what you don't have, you will never, ever have enough. She acknowledged her pain, her nightly tears, but she chose to smile during the day. I cry all night when nobody sees me, she confessed, because I'm a human. And I smile all day because I know that if I will smile, I can make people smile. Her most powerful message was a call to action. Don't die before your death. She argued that simply existing for 75 years, following a routine, accumulating wealth, was not living. True life, she said, begins when you step outside yourself, when you seek out those who need your help, when you become a source of positivity in a negative world. When you realize that you have changed someone's life, she said, and because of you this person didn't give up. That is the day when you live. Today Muniba Mazari continues to roll forward in her wheelchair, a whirlwind of color, laughter, and unyielding spirit. The canvas of her life, once nearly blanketed in the gray of despair, is now a breathtaking masterpiece. The dark strokes of pain and loss are still visible, but they do not dominate the picture. Instead, they provide the contrast that makes the vibrant colors of her resilience, her gratitude, and her love all the more brilliant. Her scars, both visible and invisible, are not flaws in the artwork. They are the texture, the depth, the very elements that give the painting its power and its story. She is a living testament to the fact that a body can be broken, but a spirit can be unbreakable. That a life can be redirected, but a soul can still reach its destination. She is not a victim. She is a victor. Not because she overcame her paralysis, but because she embraced it, wove it into the fabric of her being, and used it as a catalyst to become a beacon for millions. Her story is a long, intricate, and powerful novel still being written, a reminder to the world that the most beautiful art is often created from the broken pieces, and the most inspiring lives are those that have been tested by fire and emerged, not as ash, but as iron. Do not forget to subscribe, share, like, and comment for more stories. Thanks for watching.